Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trek Before. This time, Sins of the Father. Yeah, I don't know whose dad we're talking about. You'll figure it out. I do know, actually. It's not one of ours. Sins of the Father here on It's All Been Trek Before. Here's something that's not a sin. IABD.com/Patreon. No, Patreon.com/IABD. Go to the other site. You're in the dark web. Patreon.com/IABD. Go there. Support us. We got a long way to go. Support us into the future. We got a lot of sins to atone for, just like on Sins of the Father on It's All Been Trek Before.
Welcome out to a brand new episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. Your hosts are here.
This is Steven.
Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome. And we are here to talk about Sins of the Father. Worst episode of The Next Generation or worstest episode of The Next Generation? Go ahead.
What?
Upon reading some things after the episode, I know I'm going to be the outlier on this one. I don't know that I thought it hung the moon. I did like it, but I wasn't blown away by it. It's definitely not the worstest by any means, but I did like it, though.
So just worst for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Keith.
Wow, I liked it a lot. I don't know.
So number 12 in the rank.
Well, and some of it is my Klingon bias because they killed my sons.
It's true. You'll never forgive them.
No, never.
I thought it was fantastic. Easily best episode of the season, if not the series thus far.
Okay,
I'm very curious to hear what Steven read that has tarnished his view. And I know we'll get to that.
No. Well, actually, what I read was kind of what you guys are saying, that it's top 10 episode
of
all time. Yeah. And
I guess
I didn't get blown away by it. But
a little bit of my excitement about it is probably the fact that I know there's more coming with Duras and Kern and the politics and Worf being like, there's more to this. This is part one of a very long story. So I guess part of it is knowing some of what comes, at least in the broad strokes, even into Deep Space Nine. It continues past Next Gen and into the films. Like, it doesn't end when Next Gen ends. So I guess that probably colors it a bit, but honestly, I thought just standing on its own, I really, 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 really liked it.
And I think some of that speaks to, and I joked about my Klingon bias, but I've said before, I'm not a big fan of the Klingons so far. Although I enjoyed
last season when Riker did the exchange program
with that one, and then this season was the Emissary this season. I did like both those though, so I'm coming around. This, and maybe I forgot how much Actually, that's another reason, and this is on me as well. I wanted to see the Riker episode repeated, and so that part of that
from the other side.
Yeah. So part of that was I was expecting that, and then another thing, and then I was expecting a legal procedural, and I think different parts of it succeeded at different levels for me. Despite my bias, I did end up liking it. And as we go through, you guys can tell me everything I missed as well. So honestly,
I'm trying to put myself back into not knowing all the stuff about the Klingons that I know, because if you're just watching the original series, I agree there's not much to get excited about them on. And even in the movies, I like them better, but they're still not built out as a species yet. And Next Gen, this is only like the third Klingon episode, so we're not very far into it. There's more Klingon stuff coming in Next Gen. DS9 has a ton of Klingon stuff, and as you know, I've watched all of that. Yeah. So I guess I'm a big fan of the Klingons from all of that.
Right.
Star Trek 6, great Klingon movie. Yeah, I can see where your point about not being a fan if you've only seen this and what's come before it.
Yeah.
That didn't even occur to me that you wouldn't be as familiar with the others. I mean, it's not like I guess I'm kind of in the middle as far as the familiarity goes, and I'm enjoying that so far. Like for instance, this episode, I know that I had seen before, since we got through it, but I didn't feel it until I got to certain points, or I just, like, the name Duras came up and I was like, wait a minute, I know that name for some reason. What's going on? It's like, oh wait, and this, and it's like, oh, I don't remember exactly what's going to happen, but it's bringing back some things. And there's a certain excitement I feel when I see them coming up in TNG right now, because it feels like other stuff that I know is going to happen, but I don't really have. So,
and seeing Kern more is cool. And the end of the episode felt like to be continued to me.
Yeah.
So that makes sense that those guys will be back in some capacity.
Yeah, I don't think it's in season 3. Like I said, this is a long-term story.
Yeah.
This isn't next week, part 2. Worf's going to be disgraced for a while, but eventually there'll be follow up on the story. Yeah, I'm looking at the list of episodes for the rest of season 3 because we're near the end, and I don't think there's anything this season that deals with it.
I think there's a reason there's never been a spin-off Klingon series. Although maybe there's one in development at this point, but
I mean, the first season of Discovery was kind of half a Klingon series.
Yeah, I guess so.
But
there is one thing that, I mean, it kind of comes up toward the beginning of my notes, really, as far as Klingons. And another reason why I would sometimes feel uncomfortable with the storylines is because they're kind of a holdover from the way that the original series used to do racial allegories, essentially, and otherness. And so the way that Riker behaved when he went over to the Klingon ship, he was very invested in trying to fit in as best as he could. He was, eating like a smorgasbord of their cuisine, going in and conforming immediately to their culture. And Kern gets there, and he's immediately unwilling to really. He's just forcing his will, trying to make it more like a Klingon operation. And there was a certain permissiveness in people kind of going, "Oh man, all right, we better let him do whatever he wants." And I thought was, first of all, were there rules set up for how these exchanges were going to go? You assume by Riker's behavior that's what you should expect from someone coming over, but by them kind of like, okay, whatever, it's sort of like it's almost condescending to this person coming over. There's nothing we can do to instruct this person. They're savages, kind of. It's sort of like setting up the double standard that already makes this other species exotic and unchangeable. And later on, the kinds of confrontations between Kern and Worf, which are a completely other type of subject. The whole wrapping up ethnicity and culture. And when you start comparing those things to real life, that's where things start getting problematic for me. But that's a much longer discussion.
I guess I missed the allegory that you're pointing out.
Well, that's just. I mean, that's a general way that from Star Trek treating alien races.
Sure.
The point of what they're trying to show.
Yeah.
And it was usually a lot more blatant or apparent in the original series, and there's still holdovers because Klingons were one of the staples that came out of that era. So.
Yeah. So what I meant by that, though, not that you're wrong or by any means, just I think my personal views on Kern colored the way I saw his interactions, and he was clearly there, not clearly from the beginning, but as things were revealed, he was clearly there for ulterior motives, and he was acting a certain way to watch reactions from somebody else. And so I think he probably did play the game and play by the rules of getting sent over. And then once he was over, changed his behavior because he was there for a purpose. And the purpose wasn't the exchange program. And what he was doing was serving that purpose. I also came out of this episode thinking, and there will be plenty of Klingon stories that reinforce this belief. We're told through Worf that Klingon is a society of honor and morals and high ideals. And we see over and over again that Worf lives up to those ideals. Most of the other Klingons do not.
Yeah.
And so it's that clash of what you're told Klingon call this outsider's perspective, who probably is just taking to heart what they want you to believe their culture is. And then we see the actual politics and stuff of the individuals. And to me, there were just so many individuals in this episode that I had trouble making this broader sweep.
I guess we look at America right now. We all three of us collectively have these ideals about what, freedom and America's really about. And then there's a bunch of other people right now.
74 million.
Yeah. Who are not representing us. So if you could broad brush Americans, we'd be like, no, that's not us. But it's like, yeah, I guess we are.
I finished the most recent season of Fargo with Marianne finally.
Yeah.
And one of the Italians that came over said, once I caught on to the way the rules work here in this country, I understood America is about lying. It's about presenting yourself as this one thing, but really being something else. And citing essentially those kinds of American dream poster ideals, and presenting yourself in this way of there's this code of honor that we're supposed to have, but when it comes down to it, it's just everyone being criminals essentially.
Yeah, you talk about a code of honor, but everyone wink wink violates that code of honor because hey, if you can get away with it, good job.
Yeah.
Code of honor. Let's not talk about that.
To go back to your point, Jimmy, about the Klingons and not doing the code of honor, about halfway through, I wrote the Klingons need to check themselves.
Before they wreck themselves?
Yeah, because they're talking about all this honor and stuff. And I'm like, I was exactly to that point you're making. Like, and there's two ways with that. One is I felt like they weren't, and obviously as we find out in the episode, these guys aren't playing, they have nothing to do with honor. They're the exact opposite. Worf is the one person who is, and that's a great ending.
Well, they are the politicians.
Yeah, but just to go all the way back to the beginning, I think there also is an element for me of like, well, these guys aren't like the Federation. Why aren't they like the Federation? I don't think I like their style. So, and then it goes to Keith's point of like, where do you set the boundaries of, you know what, they handle things differently than we do. That's cool. At what point does it become, you know what, that's not cool. That's not cool.
Yeah. I think as we go on, you'll see other noble Klingons and what a Klingon army is like when they're your allies and when you're working side by side with them. And I think that will change your views a little bit more from where you are right now.
Yeah, and I talked on the original series how much I love both Romulan commanders, and I thought they were such strong characters, and even the supporting cast, just because Balance of Terror showed them more. And we never really had a great Klingon, even though the Klingons were talked about, and we had their ships.
I was going to say, I beg to differ, because those exact same Klingon captains come back in Deep Space Nine, same actors, same characters, 3 of them. And they're fantastic. I just don't think we got it. I think you're right. We didn't get a good view of them. Later, we'll learn more about them.
Yeah, and maybe I'm violating my own thing because they're not overly big. I mean, Michael Ansara is a great actor. He was Kang, but I thought that show was good. But Aaron Diversi is a great episode. John Colicos, who plays Kor, and I think it's Kor. Actually, he is really good. He's actually really good, evil. So, but in my mind, I'm thinking, well, he's not a big presence, but he was a good Klingon because he was evil. He was one of those guys like, well, it's about honor, and then he was violating it, but he did it very slyly and slickly.
Yeah, I mean, Deep Space Nine will get John Colicos as Kor, Michael Ansara as Kang, and William Campbell as Koloff.
That's right. So, yeah, William Campbell it's Trouble with Tribbles, and he's also Squire of Gothos, so that's a tough one. But yeah, those guys are all 3 good actors. I don't want to disparage them or anything, but yeah.
Well, I think you'll appreciate their characters more when we see them as old men too.
I look forward to that. I do look forward to.
They live a little longer than humans. They're in better shape than McCoy was in Encounter at Farpoint. I'll say that. One thing that stood out to me was the line, "It's a good day to die, but the day is not over yet." It's a good day to die is a very, very famous Klingon phrase, but I was trying to remember if we'd seen it yet, and I looked it up, and it doesn't look like we are. I think this is the first time it's uttered in Star Trek. It's a good day to die. However, the phrase has its origins in Native American culture. Crazy Horse is thought to have said it first.
I thought it was from like a Schwarzenegger 80s action film. Yeah. Good day to die.
I mean, maybe Schwarzenegger says it in the 80s too, but that's where Star Trek took it from the Native Americans.
That kind of goes to the point I was trying to make before about the way they set up these kinds of allegories, or about the way that they build these other cultures to imitate certain kinds of perceptions that Americans would have about exotic, tribal situations. Yep. I think what they're trying to show you is that it's more about branding. Honor is just like it's about protecting the brand rather than protecting the actual ideal.
The episode starts off by mentioning the exchange program and reminding us that Riker took part of it, which I guess you have to do in episodic television, but that excited me. I had forgetting parts of this episode. I was thinking there'd be more of the exchange program stuff, and that was pretty cool. I also kind of enjoyed that Riker was still there, even though Kurn was the XO. It felt awkward. It kind of felt weird, but I liked it. The interplay.
Yeah, I did too. I thought it was amusing and kind of dramatic may not be the right word, but it helped set that scene of like, what is the deal with this guy? There's the line early on that I think they either say I wouldn't patronize a Klingon warrior. Heck, I would. I'd patronize the hell out of a Klingon warrior. But I thought Kurn seemed prepared to a point. He was prepared to run a ship. He wasn't prepared to deal with the people on the Enterprise, but he was prepared to run a ship.
What do you think of Kurn's speech on discipline on the bridge when he first came on?
And it's funny to think about that. And like you said, once you realize the turn by Kurn, it's like, oh, that makes sense now. But yeah, I thought
the Wesley and Data moment was a little forced, but other than that, where Wesley's whispering and
I loved Kurn's bearing to a lot of those things. Just The exaggerated posture, the way that he sat in that chair.
Very new football coach, new boss, the substitute teacher that you can't control, you can't take advantage of, kind of a thing. This isn't like the old person. Yeah, I'm the new. There's a new sheriff in town or whatever.
And the way they kind of slithered out of that chair to go up and confront Worf, just over that progress report, it was just like man. I was laughing quite a bit during that. Again, once you realize the purpose, that makes it even better. It makes the character feel a little more redeemable.
To go back to Riker for a second, there's a moment where I think it's either before Kern gets on the turbo lift with him or somewhere in there, where he's stroking his soul patch. I don't know if you can get more 90s than Riker stroking his soul patch.
It seemed natural to me that the crew went and whined to Riker about Kern.
Yes.
Even though in Riker's position, and I thought he handled it pretty well, he's basically like, guys, I can't do anything. He's your XO. Just deal with it. Even after learning about Kern, I did find it too exaggerated and posturing for him to threaten to kill Riker for offering a suggestion. I can't believe that's sincere. I think he's just messing.
My question was, so is that better or worse on the Klingon ship?
I mean, Riker was on the Klingon ship, and from what we saw, I don't think it's that extreme. I think Kern was just posturing.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a lot of Klingon stuff is posturing.
The dinner scene, Picard carving the bird, and Kern and the caviar. Like, there's so many great things about that scene. And if you noticed, half the senior staff didn't have meat on their plate. Not just Troy, but Picard and Geordi both have vegetarian plates as well.
Before we get too far, I wanted to also point out in 10 Forward when Riker came in and did the straddle mount for the chair to just sit into
the Riker maneuver.
Just to sit with Wesley. Loved it. Also, that the whole turbolift thing that spoke to my second note, which I was going on about the condescension. I was actually relieved when Riker confronted him in some way.
Yeah,
that answered some of my questions. I mean, is this what they expected? Is somebody going to say something? Or are they just going to keep going? Well, what are you going to do? I'd like to see that there was some structure, and of course, Riker being assertive enough to do something at least.
So the Kern Worf scene, I was a little bit like, really, is being polite that offensive to you?
Yeah,
but I guess he insulted his honor by not treating him as forthright.
No, that's the thing I was talking about before. That's the thing that you wouldn't necessarily know. Bluntly, being white, you're not confronted in those ways. The way that a black person might confront another black person about their blackness. It's very much like that kind of a scene. And there was the undertone of that in the tone of his voice with the way that he was presenting these things to Worf. And of course, he came right out with the food being too bland for a real Klingon. I guess the word we had for it now is microaggressions. Even though this probably even more purposeful than microaggressions are as we need to understand them anymore. Dog whistle stuff. That's another way of putting it, I guess. I don't think it was entirely lost on the rest of the crew either, though. It certainly would have been lost on Riker, what he's doing. But politeness was just Kern's word, or just the way he was putting it. Make it sting even more.
So, Keith, you said you remember this episode. I obviously remember who Kern is. Steven, were you surprised when he revealed he was Worf's brother?
Yes. Yeah, I was. Yeah. So
I was surprised too. Actually,
you didn't remember that?
Yeah, that's why I had it all caps. I'd forgotten about the It's all started coming back once that happened. Okay. But
yeah, I mean, I knew from the beginning of the episode he was his brother, but I was trying to put myself back into it. I'm like, yeah, I think they did a good job of keeping that under wraps until it was revealed.
Yeah, I had no idea. I knew it was Candyman, but I didn't know it was the worst.
Yeah, we haven't talked about.
Oh my god, that was Tony Todd.
Tony Todd plays Kern.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I didn't even I think I saw the name. It didn't even register.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is best known for Candyman, The Rock, The Man from Earth, which is a really good movie in my opinion by Jerome. What's his face?
Wetzel?
No,
that's what I was gonna say.
The original series writer Jerome Bixby.
Oh, okay.
He's got 231 credits. So many things.
Yeah.
He'll play Kern again in 2 more episodes of Next Gen and 1 episode of DS9. And he also plays another character in Deep Space Nine where he doesn't have to wear alien makeup. That's really, really good. He voiced Kern for a video game, and then he voiced some other aliens for other Star Trek video games. So he's got quite a few credits, Trek credits, as well as just general acting credits.
As soon as I realized it was him, it made me get a little closer to the screen kind of a thing.
Kern was left with a friend when Worf's family went off. And I get the explanation on that. But how do you think that friend felt when he all of a sudden had to raise this little kid that wasn't even a year old?
It better be a real good friend.
We hear about Duras. He's accused Moog of crimes. And Worf has to ask for leave so that he could go and be executed on the Klingon homeworld, basically.
The family name will be disgraced for 7 generations.
Yes.
They say. I'm like, that's it? And then who's keeping track? Like, at what point does it, what's the cutoff? Like, hey, I don't know if you heard, but your family name is back, baby. I mean, if your family was hit with this, wouldn't you be like, your kid turned 16, like, let's get this going, buddy. And so 7 generations, does right now count as 1 or 7 after that? You know, there's a lot of questions I have.
I would think Moog would be the first generation since he was the one that dishonored. Yeah. Right?
So then
Worf's generation 2, Worf's son will be generation 3, and then his great-grandchildren will finally be undisgraced.
So, you know, maybe the century. But at the same time, I'm making all these jokes about it. It's great specificity, though. I appreciate the specificity.
And the fact that the execution with honor is clearly preferable to accepting dishonor to the Klingons, that they just assume he'd rather be killed than dishonored.
Right. Well, here's my question, and maybe they mentioned this, I missed it, but is he condemned to death not because of the dishonor, but for showing up and daring to say, well, he's innocent?
Yeah.
Or, okay, so, because I wrote, is this death for failing to exonerate? Because Klingon jurisprudence is it's problematic. I mean,
this was a really, really bad crime. This wasn't.
That's true.
Jaywalking.
That's true.
It could have been sort of like stopping the need for the generational punishment. You know, it's sort of like you're cauterizing cauterizing the shame, perhaps.
From the legal community, our thing is like, it doesn't matter who you are, even the worst crime, you want that person represented. Even if you're not innocent, I think in our country we believe, or the profession I belong to, that they should have that representation. Flip it over a little bit. So later when Picard essentially becomes co-counsel, and I don't think they answered this, but my question was, so does he get killed too if they don't exonerate him?
I wouldn't think so, because I think the reason they were going to kill Kern was because he was Worf's brother, not because he was the co-counsel.
Okay. Well, and so the counter argument to what I had just said before is, this goes to another thing that we want for every client. If every attorney, before they took a case, it was like, all right, you can take this case, but if you don't win it, you're going to die. You would get zealous representation from every attorney.
I don't think attorneys would be going into the law at that point.
There wouldn't be that many, but they're going to work real hard for you.
Yeah, but none of them would ever reach retirement age. You're not going to have a perfect record. So jumping back a little bit, once Kern reveals who he is, the genuine joy he has at being around Worf is touching to me. Like, I get it. This is your big brother. You've waited your whole life to meet. Or not your whole life, because he only found out he was like 16 or something. But still, like, I thought that was so touching, and what a cool way to play it.
I am relieved, too, I will say, in retrospect, that it played out that way. I think it would have been really tedious after a bit if it was still just that whole, I resent you so much for not being there, even though it's not your fault, or hammering in that you're still not Klingon enough for me. That whole, just, I'm glad that it's done. We're revealed. I'm proud of you for doing this. Let's go.
Yeah, I like that. When we get to Kronos or Quonos, depending on how you pronounce it, because it's been both in Star Trek, the Klingon homeworld, all I could think of was, it's a dark and stormy night. Because it's basically starting a new episode. It was all rainy and stormy on the homeworld.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it did feel like all of a sudden we're in a new episode after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Should this have been a 2-parter on that subject?
Pin in that, because we'll do that next time. I was very inspired when Worf arrived on the homeworld and claimed his heritage. I mean, I guess just because I love the character, it couldn't help going through my mind his whole life leading up to that moment, and finally stepping foot on his ancestral home and reclaiming his birthright. No matter the circumstances, no matter that he was there for horrible reasons and things were dire. If you think about how he was raised and who he was raised by and everything, that had to be some thrill for him to be there. And I felt that from Michael Dorn.
Is this the prodigal son returning? I mean, literally, is it Joseph and
sort of
without the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat?
Sort of.
Yeah. Didn't dawn on me till just now.
I also kind of liked that Duras was basically the anti-Worf. Like, they had a very similar story that his dad was also killed on Khitomer, but he was raised differently and turned out very differently. And it's interesting to compare the two as two sides of the same coin. It was played by Patrick Massett, who was best known for being the writer of Lara Croft Tomb Raider and the producer on Friday Night Lights. So he's not a big, and a producer on The Blacklist now. So he's more of a producer than an actor.
I wrote down at some point that Worf should choke out Duras, the prosecutor. And I didn't understand, and again, I clearly do not understand Klingon jurisprudence, but essentially it's a prosecutor and the defense attorney, and the prosecutor is getting all in his face and everything else and threatening what he's going to do to the defense attorney.
There was a slap.
That's it, yeah. So, I mean, I guess there's something to Worf just being like, I'm not going to get into this. I'm not going to go there. I'm such a Klingon. I'm just going to take this. You can't break through to me. But I still would have encouraged him to choke out the prosecutor.
I mean, Worf did it back later. Deservedly so.
That's true.
It almost seemed like there was a formality to the accusation process, sort of like an optional.
He was allowed to do that.
Yeah, it was optional, but he took the initiative to do it, like a glove slap for a duel or something.
Yep.
Those were very odd opening remarks. And now that you mention it, when Worf slaps him back, it makes me think of Tropic Thunder when Al Pacino slaps Robert Downey Jr.'s character, whatever the hell's character's name was. I told you I'd get you. I told you.
Kurtan shows up in Redemption, which is the season 4 finale. Duras and Kimpek will be back before then, early in season 4, in another episode called Reunion. But Kimpek, who was the judge, the High Chancellor of the Klingons, that actor, Charles Cooper, played the Klingon ambassador in Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Different character. His name was Cord, but another overweight, not so honorable Klingon that we just saw in a film. They reused the actor as the Klingon High Chancellor.
I got some thoughts on the weight thing, but I'm going to save that for later in the discussion.
So this was the same actor from the movie with Kirk and everything, the whole.
Yeah. Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, one that was on the planet of galactic peace. He
did seem familiar, and I thought almost he was supposed to be the same character.
No, different character. Different character. Because there's no way Cord's still alive. He was not a healthy Klingon. But Picard does his homework once he takes on that role. I really liked him and Riker and Data and Dr. Crusher and everybody all just putting the whole ship's resources and declaring Worf's name. That was fun.
Yeah, it reminded me of A Matter of Perspective. From my perspective, it was very much like A Matter of Perspective. In that they were the actual people trying to get to the facts rather than just all this other nonsense. So it's good to have an investigative team that can work for you. As Perry Mason has proved over and over.
We've gotten to the vicinity of my favorite scene, I think, which was when I think Duras or somebody said something to Picard like, Starfleet can't fight. And he said, yeah.
I wrote this down, actually.
You're welcome to test that assumption if you'd like. Yeah.
This might be my favorite Picard line so far. And I would love to whip this out at any point. Should I enter a situation like this? Yeah. You may test that assumption at your convenience.
Yes.
That was awesome.
I put
perfectly delivered. It was great.
That's like the classiest possible way of saying F around and find out, essentially. Or just like...
Picard was awesome in this episode.
Yeah, he was.
Peak Picard. Really good.
Totally was.
So the first big twist in this episode was that Kurtan was Worf's brother. But I thought Kimpek telling Worf to leave was the second big twist in this episode.
Yeah, I wrote down at that point, this is a clear case of judicial bias. And it's clearly ex parte communications that should not be going on between a judge and the attorney. Without somebody recording it. Again, I do not understand Klingon jurisprudence, but at that point you have a mistrial.
This wouldn't have come up on the screen with like the beeping chair, everything like back in the evidence room.
I mean, Kimpek's not a judge. He's the High Chancellor of the Klingon people. He's the ruler of the entire Klingon Empire.
But he's also deciding the case, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I didn't realize he was like the what?
Yeah. Because I'm pretty sure because this was involving the High Council and the leadership of the entire empire. So that's why. Yeah, Kimpek was chancellor. In fact, he was the longest serving Klingon chancellor of the Klingon High Council. Huh. And no wonder, because clearly he was wanting to do what needed to be done to stay in power and preserve whatever.
Well, I mean, it sounds like he would be like the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court or something, right?
No, he was the Chancellor of the High Council, which means he's basically the president of the Klingon Empire.
But I mean, it seems like they're both highest judge and
I see what
leader.
Yeah, the judicial branch is not separate from the executive branch in this regard.
So I feel like in the Klingon world, you can be president, judge, jury, and executioner.
I mean, I think he was going to let Duras do the execution, but
that's fair. But he could have done it himself. I mean, he's a Klingon. He could have done it himself.
Kimpek is the law.
I am the Senate.
Kimpek I understood as a politician.
Even the chancellor.
Duras seemed much eviler to me, especially the secret assassination attempt in the hallway, and not even being willing to do it himself, which is so un-Klingon, to have somebody else do his dirty work.
There's no honor in that.
The scene where Worf chooses Picard to be his second, that was very touching. Brief and thankfully not wordy, but touching.
Do you think it made sense for him to choose Picard instead of Riker?
I do. I get why you would say he should choose Riker, absolutely, and I think that's what Picard meant when he's like, there's younger, better in shape people. But I think Worf recognizes that in this situation, it's not all about muscular strength. And Picard can handle himself in a fight, as we saw and we'll see again.
Yeah.
So
maybe he also chose him because of his plot armor.
That could be as well.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that. Conceivably, would you have imagined that Picard could have been killed in any of these episodes throughout this entire series? Would you have? Yeah, I remember.
Not yet. Wait till the season finale.
Hey, they killed Tasha Yar.
Right. I was going to say, what's her name? You know, the blonde security woman could die. All bets are off for that echelon of senior officers.
I will say there will come a time where a Star Trek series is not afraid to kill their captain at the end of the 2-hour pilot. We're just not there yet.
I guess alternatively, if he'd gone to his buddy, Lieutenant Denman, we'd have been like, that guy's getting killed by Klingons. If that's his co-counsel, he's dead.
He would have been a yellow shirt instead of a red shirt probably, right. But yes, absolutely. When they're doing the research to help Worf, Geordi's looking at the readout screen with everybody else. How does he read the text with his visor? Every time we see his visor, I wouldn't think it has the...
Oh, man.
It bothers me.
Forgetting about that.
I'm going to just go out on the limb and make excuses and think this is the chief engineer of a starship. There's probably backlit displays behind it that convey the information to him, or he has something in his visor that connects and lets him read it. But still, whenever he looks at a screen, I'm like, you can't see what that says.
It could be Bluetooth or something, and there could be some little window that shows that maybe something physical in the monitors would be a better explanation. It doesn't seem like it would be very practical or even legible if he has to have a whole screen up, like a little window picture-in-picture thing.
I don't think it's a whole screen up. I don't think the vision's that good.
Converts it all to ones and zeros, or vice versa.
Converts it to something that his brain can comprehend, but I don't think it's just text the way we think of it. Kalest, whose name was way too similar to Kalar, I thought. Or is it Kalest? Kalest.
I think it was
Kalest. Way too similar to Kalar. She was the old lady Klingon. This is the only episode of Star Trek she's in. She only has 15 acting credits. I guess she started as a comedian. But the actress's name was Thelma Lee. She is not a good actor. And every time that scene where Picard was talking to her, and the lighting in the sets contributed to this, but that scene to me belonged in I, Claudius, the PBS miniseries from the 70s that Patrick Stewart was in. That's the level of acting and design that was present in that scene.
Wow. I guess I wasn't really focusing on the screen as well as I should have been.
I kept thinking she was the woman who's in Kingpin and...
the landlord?
Yes, the landlord in Kingpin, and there's something about Mary. She's the friend of Mary's that I thought it was her for a couple minutes. I was really into it, and then not so much after that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that there's overacting has its place in certain ways, and you might be right about maybe they fed off each other in a certain way that made it seem like the classical style. It seemed
and
out of
Patrick
place.
Stewart was in that miniseries too. So that
Yes, I know. That's
only he had hair then. The Patrick Stewart fight scene was better, but I thought it was a little bit weak that's what got her to just change her mind.
Yeah, it reminded me of, and actually the earlier scene did too. I'll get more into this later too. But one of my favorite movies of all time, and probably my favorite legal movie, and probably one of the big reasons I was like, I want to be an attorney, besides my mom telling me, you should be a lawyer. You want to argue about everything. When I was very young. The Verdict, 1982, a little earlier. There's a scene where Newman has to go he finds this witness he finds it through whatever, dogged determination and investigation. Or his
Newman.
Yeah. And
sorry.
It's a very similar conversation where he's trying to talk her into it. And then the shift happens. It's a little too easy. Again, I'm going to give it to Patrick Stewart can be persuasive, and Paul Newman sure as hell can be persuasive. Should win the Oscar for that movie. That's a different podcast altogether. But anyway, it reminded me very much of it. You have this late kind of, oh, here's our surprise witness. You know what? Actually, I'm confusing two different witnesses in that. The other witness he convinces later that she is actually outstanding, and that's another great movie. Just go watch The Verdict, and we'll talk about it.
Well, I mean, about Jimmy's point about it not being too easy or something, or she shouldn't have been convinced by that. If you back out and think about the way that the audience and, we were supposed to think about Klingons monolithically as a race, the whole premise of that time bubble episode or the portal episode was that sacrifice would have meant so much to the Empire that they would have changed their minds and formed a treaty of some sort. So maybe her seeing that act of bravery kind of snapped her out of it, and
also seeing the treachery of the opponent.
Yes.
That's an excellent point, Keith. I like that parallel you drew. That makes me feel a little better about that. Kim Peck, man, he's a bad High Chancellor. I mean, he's a great High Chancellor most of the time, I guess. I mean, from a politician standpoint, not from a good person standpoint. But when Picard walks in with her and he's like, oh, don't tell him what you know yet. And then Kim Peck's immediately like, Duras, you did it. I'm just like, whoa, dude. that was way too easy. Come on, Kim Peck. You're better than that. But I did love Kalest line to Kim Peck at the end of that scene. You're still fat.
Is this fat shaming by our late arriving heroine?
I mean, yeah.
It's her personal preference. It was like, I know you're hitting on me. It's not going to work.
As a fat man, I'll allow it.
Fair enough.
They talk about how the real cost of this, and this was the moment where if you're thinking this is just about one person's honor and everything, and these Duras is shady and all that crap, I get that. But then all of a sudden, when they talk about like, this is barely preventing a civil war here. Yeah. You really, I guess I felt the weight of that right away. And I get why Worf decided to do what he did. And I also get kind of why it made me not hate Kim Peck as much, like why he would be going to these lengths to cover it up. Because if he thinks his people are going to fall into civil war, those are high stakes. And I guess it would kind of be like if what Gerald Ford's line of thinking was like, if they convicted Nixon, if I don't pardon Nixon, this is just going to make everything fight. And it's the thing I'm scared of with the Biden administration, of they may decide to pardon Trump just so we don't fall into civil war. At this point, I'm like,
shaking my head right now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want him pardoned. I'm just saying.
I know.
Jimmy, by the time this episode airs, Trump will have been pardoned.
That's not even funny.
It is.
That is so not funny.
It is. I'm not even considering that a possibility myself.
Worf makes a deal to protect Kern and the Empire. Has Worf ever been more heroic?
Maybe.
I mean, the answer is clearly no, but
on screen,
perhaps I think it's such a non-action action that he's taking that it doesn't seem heroic. But
it was like delegacied or disinherited or something along those lines. Or
to me, it's something. What he's giving up. Like he just set foot back on his home world. He just reconnected with his brother, and now he has to give up his family's legacy. That's a lot for him.
It is, but it's. I think I see where Steven's coming from as far as like from the audience point of view for our standards. It feels almost convenient. This is where the difference in culture works to the writer's favor in the sense that they can make a happy ending that doesn't feel happy necessarily. A non-happy ending for Worf, but a happy ending for the audience. that he has a way out of this that where he keeps his nobility to from our perspective, and he's still alive. So
I get that. I don't know. I guess, and again, maybe this could be from watching Worf for 10 years versus 3, but I just feel what he's giving up, and it feels very Worf, first of all, but it also feels very heroic and noble.
Yeah, I wrote appreciate the sacrifice, but ... I like unhappy endings. There's plenty of movies and shows where I'm like sitting on the edge of forever. I mean, it's my favorite, and that is if a happy ending's London, that's Tokyo. So my thought right now is if the Duras and the Chancellor, as soon as Worf showed up, why was I like, hey, can we have a talk? All you got to do is this, because they didn't. Did they give him that option?
They didn't. I think it's because, again, this was back to what I said earlier about this dishonorment being worse than death to Klingons.
Yeah,
they didn't think it was something he would consider.
That's fair.
Oh, I thought you okay.
This wasn't the dishonor your father for several generations, and this is why I wish I could remember what the term was they used, because this seemed like way more than dishonor. Like, not just dishonored, but you're gone from Klingon society. Something at least like if you're dishonored, you're still there, Well, not the actual criminals' kids, they kill them, but the rest of the family's still there. And this is just gone.
What he gets out of this is there's not a Klingon civil war.
Yeah, and his brother gets to live.
That makes sense.
So that leads up to, I think, probably my other favorite scene of the show. I guess I have a special affinity for these types of scenes, especially after Bloodsport. There's a scene toward the end where the main antagonist does something blatantly dishonorable or cheats in some way or takes things too far. And the judges stand up, turn their backs on him, and the entire audience silently, just immediately to their feet, back turn. I just that kill. Just I don't know. That always cracks me up. And so in this, yeah, it's like that kind of action movie funny. It's hard to put into words where it's funny and cool at the same time, kind of like a, But I appreciated what it was showing as far as the impact goes. The synchronization of it was kind of funny, but really the last bit with the brother just it was over the top. It was still awesome, and it just really just like
that last image is great, and it's kind of a mic drop for them to walk out. Yeah, him and Picard walking out.
Well, and then Picard follows up with that conversation with Kern where he's like, "Look, you're living to fight another day. Yeah, we lost, but we're still alive.
Mm-hmm. This isn't over yet."
It's not, and we will. It's not over because we know there's more episodes coming with Kim Peck and Duras and Kern. So, fashion.
Klingon. I don't like Klingon fashion. I don't like Romulan fashion in this new world.
I like Klingon fashion. I thought it was great. I don't think it was much new. We'd seen it before, but I like it.
Yeah. I think Kalar was the only Klingon fashion I've liked. So I take that. I should take a couple steps back.
Well, she was only half Klingon.
That's true. So I only half liked it. I think Crusher says this, what kind of weapon makes that kind of wound? And then I think Worf explains to her, well, it's a blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, that was a rhetorical question, clearly. That was clearly a rhetorical question. So I thought
that is a nasty knife with the 2 extra little knives on the side.
That's very Klingon. It's very on brand. I can't remember who tells him, whether it's the old woman or somebody else tells either Worf or Picard, like, you're getting very close to the truth or whatever. And it was very JFK, and then that line, this is the Seinfeld part of this podcast, is also said by the caddy in the classic episode where they sue Sue Ellen Mishke for walking down the street wearing a bra. The caddy is the episode. Yeah, that's the name of the episode. And the caddy is the one who tells Kramer, you're so close. You're on the green. And then they have Sue Ellen Mishke try on the bra. And if it does not fit, you must have quit. So Jackie Childs was not in favor of letting that happen anyway. So the caddy's never heard from him again. But that reminded me of both those movies.
Who told you to try on the bra? Who told you to Did
I tell you to do it? I have one last note, and this is another legal note. A lot of hearsay evidence, once again, is introduced here. And I know, again, I don't know Klingon jurisprudence, but there was a lot of well, so-and-so said this happened, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, why aren't they here? Why aren't they here to present this evidence so I can have cross-examination?
Because it's not really a legal trial.
I know, but it angered me so much. If I was Worf, I still would have said.
Wait till we get the Klingon legal serial or procedural on CBS All Access, and then you can judge Klingon court.
I look forward to that.
This episode was directed by Les Landau, who is a frequent director. We've talked about him plenty in the past. It's story by Drew Digans. He's only got 2 credits as a writer. It's this episode and then Reunion, which is the early episode next season with Kim Peck and Duras returning. And then he's got 4 acting credits. So he's got almost no IMDb credits there. He did story by, but the teleplay was written by Ron Moore, who we've talked about is one of the big guys, and W. Reed Moran, who I'm not familiar with. And this is the only teleplay by credit he has for Star Trek. So I don't know why Ron Moore worked with this guy. Ron Moore's fingerprints were on it. I like Ron Moore.
From way back in the beginning, just another observation about the American brand of hypocrisy, which essentially is that the cognitive dissonance thing that just goes unnoticed by the person who has it. It's just sort of like, it's hypocritical, but it makes perfect sense to them that they're not the same thing.
Alternate episodes?
I was very lazy with mine. The Verdict. I just go see The Verdict.
My alternate episode is they unfreeze a lawyer who's been in cryostasis, and Samuel T. Cogley.
Yes. I was going to mention him earlier when we were talking about what lawyer would do this. I'll take it on. I'm going to die soon anyway.
And they the smoke goes out and he comes out of the chamber.
They bring him up like Stallone and Wesley Snipes in Demolition Man, actually. There you go. And he's naked with a law book in his hand.
I thought you were going for Phil Hartman when you started all that.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one too.
Caveman lawyer.
Yeah,
that's a good one. So let's talk. Let's rank Wesley on a scale of 1 to 10. How annoying was he?
I thought about moving up a notch, but I gave him a 1.
I think the behavior seemed reasonable under the circumstances. 1.
Oh, well, I disagree. I don't think the behavior is reasonable, and we had so little of him. He didn't get to balance it with anything else.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with 4. So he averages out to a 2.
Man, I was all right. I mean, honestly, I was tempted to. I was a little torn, but yeah.
I thought about.
I probably would have gone 3 if you both hadn't gone the 1. I think he deserves at least a 2 average. So we're giving him a 2, which is his second highest annoyance rating this season. The season premiere, he had a 3.5. Who was your annoyance this episode?
Mine is Duras. My dad would say about him, and I have to clean this up for this podcast, but for him to be prosecuting or whatever when his family's responsible, or more or less, it takes a lot of GD gall to do that, is what my dad would have said. And it just I really hate that guy, and I hope he comes back later so I want some vindication.
Duras does come back early next season.
All right. My blood is boiling like a Klingon's.
I agree for the same reasons. It just represents everything that is wrong in the real world and in the fictional world. And it's just, I don't understand why he wouldn't have been out.
I don't agree with Duras's actions, but also he wasn't the one that committed the crime. It was his dad, and he's trying to protect his family and legacy. And so I'm not I don't like him. I still think he's a villain, but I kind of understand a little bit, not fully, not enough to justify, but a little bit. So I'm not going to choose him. I'm going with Kalest for her terrible acting that belonged to Night Claudius.
Wow.
Sorry. A crush of Star Trek. Would anyone like to pick Kim Peck, or is he too fat for you?
So after our episode 2 weeks ago, now before I start my notes, I write down greater than Gina Hecht. And so it just becomes a yes or no response for me. No was the answer this week. So, yeah.
Fair. Because Kim Peck was too fat for you. I get it. It's fine. Okay, Keith.
Tempted to pick Kalest just to counteract your criticism of her.
Do it.
But no.
You're going to stick with Captain Garrett?
Yes. Okay, yeah, I did think for a second.
You don't want to pick Kern?
Nah.
Okay. I'm going to stick with Garrett as well. Obviously, I'm not choosing Kalis. And obviously, Kim Peck's too fat for me. No, not fat shaming. I'm too fat for me. Let's rank the episode. I have in bold letters, let Keith go first.
Yes.
I really liked it, so I'm going to put it at 10.
You're gonna do that.
Yes. It feels like a top 5 thing.
Yeah, I think it's in that area. I don't think it hung the moon, but I'm definitely clear the outline of this episode. But I think it definitely belongs, because what's number 5? We're talking like
The Offspring. Data's
yeah.
daughter.
So I think
Okay.
yeah, I think it definitely belongs there, because I think if going the other way to 6, I think it would be clear that like, oh no, it's definitely not in that realm. But
I'd put it number 1. I think I kind of already said that. Might be my favorite. Season 2, Measure of the Man's number 1. That would be tough for me. I feel like that was the quintessential Data episode. This is the quintessential Worf episode, but I'd say it's definitely my top 2 episodes of the series thus far. I think I'm higher than you guys want to go. Let's start a little higher than number 5 though. We can always come back down. Let's start with Yesterday's Enterprise. Better or worse than that?
There's a canon legacy kind of thing for both of those things, or the significance for both of those. Not as much good science fiction for me in this one comparatively, but I don't know.
My rewatchability factor is more for Yesterday's Enterprise, but this one carries more weight. Then again, I'd watch City on the Edge of Forever. I'd watch City on the Edge of another fat joke. I'd watch City on the Edge of Forever every day. So maybe not every day, but obviously I've watched that many, many, many times. So yeah, you could push me either way. I'm kind of where Keith is, where I feel like the heaviness and the legacy of this actually push it up above.
I would put it above, as I was clear with. So it's really up to the two of you if you want it above or below.
Above, I think. Yeah, it's just
okay. Yesterday's Enterprise was number 2 for the season, by the way.
Okay. So what was number 1? What's the current?
The Defector.
Oh, the Romulan episode.
And that's the Romulan.
I don't know why Yesterday's Enterprise didn't beat that, but
that is.
Didn't. Now,
what did happen? I guess we need to go back and let's go back to the tape. What did we do there?
I don't know, because now I'm like, why? I think I wanted to put Yesterday's Enterprise lower, so I might have argued. And now, like, I'm thinking back.
I think that is what happened. I think it is what happened.
I think it's my fault, even though now I'm regretting it. Okay, but I would put this above the Defector, but you two get to decide if it goes above or below.
It was my favorite Romulan episode so far, but that's a very low bar in TNG. So if I put that above Yesterday's Enterprise, I feel like I'd probably put it above the Defector too. But.
Okay.
Yeah, there we are. I mean, it's just
I thought you guys were gonna make me put it lower.
There are a couple points of comparison there that I would think. It's like the difference between Romulan political intrigue and Klingon political intrigue. I kind of like the Romulan wave that just those conversations they would have over the view screen with Picard and the other leader, just where they won't admit what's going on. And there's that Cold War kind of dance. But
I like Klingons better. I like the more straightforward. Although I agree with Steven, the Balance of Terror was better than any Klingon episode in the original series. And other than arguably Trouble with Tribbles, but that wasn't great for the Klingon aspects. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm very excited. I thought you guys were going to make me put it lower than number 1. Man. I almost texted you when I watched this. This is number 1 or I will fight you. I felt that strongly about it. I felt really, really strongly about this one. So I'm excited.
If I felt strongly about 2 or 3, then I would be like, let's go. But
yeah,
I enjoyed both those episodes, but
we've probably said this before, but I feel like the season has been consistently strong. So it doesn't feel like anything really is.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, there had to win something, but you know what I mean?
I think we were just talking about how great a matter of perspective is, and it's at number 8. So that tells you how strong this season is, in my opinion. I mean, honestly, you have to go pretty far down to get a bad episode this season. Season 3 is where TNG really found its stride, and I think we've discovered that for sure. And the second half of the season has been so much stronger than the first, with the exception of Who Watches the Watchers, which was the Proto-Vulcans, and The Price. Those are both up there, and they're from the first half, but the second half of the season is dominating now. We're in this streak of really high episodes. So we'll see if that can hold next week when we talk Allegiance. Picard is kidnapped and held with 3 different aliens, and meanwhile replaced with a replica as imposter captain.
Well, if there's one thing we know, we love it when there's supercards. And I love any episode where you just put people in a random place and they have to figure out how to get out. But more about that next week. I'll have to watch the episode.
I think I'm going to go on a limb and say it's going to be better than Sins of the Father. No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
That's a mighty tiny limb.
Until then, live long.
And prosper. Even if your dad's accused of a terrible crime.
And disinherited. Or something.
Commandant. Whatever it was. I don't speak Klingon.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?